All right, here we are. We're live finally. We're having a little bit of technical issues right now, so hopefully we'll be able to work through that. But we're here, Chevy Pro Luke Clausen, and how you doing, Luke?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Excellent, excellent. So I guess we'll jump right into this. The first question, um, yeah, we're gonna preview Smith Lake. So if you want to go ahead and just kind of talk to us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I've actually been to Smith Lake, I think, for 4 different events, and it's changed quite a bit over the years, from what I understand. And we've been there several different times to see, there are different times of the year to see different aspects of it. But I think this is probably going to be the best time of year we've been there, and it's probably going to fish as strong as it possibly can. And from what I understand, Smith Lake's a lot healthier than it's ever been, or it has been in recent years. So looking forward to it. I think we're going to see some big spots, some 3 and 4 pound spots, and you're going to see a few largemouth over 5 pounds every day, I believe.
And we've heard that Smith is fishing a lot better. Does a lot of that relate to the largemouth population being a lot healthier? Do you think we'll see more largemouth this time than we did back in 2008?
I don't some research on the lakes we go to, but the little bit that I've heard, the largemouth and the spots are both a lot bigger than they have been, and that's largely in part to the blueback herring taking off in there and the fish having a better food source than shad, and of course getting bigger and healthier. I think both a lot bigger specimens than they have been in the past. When we were back there in 2008, we saw a lot of spots that were 14 to 16 inches long, and from what I understand, there's a lot more 3 pound spots in there now. But even the largemouth we were catching then were 2.5, 3 pounds on average, and now there's a lot more 3 to 5 pounders. It sounds like so. I think just on average, both of them are going to be better size fish than they were. And as far as the number of spots versus largemouth, this cold weather and like this, I still believe we're going to see more spots than we do largemouth, but potentially bigger ones of both species.
All right, and again, back 2008, you fished spots the entire time, correct?
I believe I caught one largemouth the whole tournament. Yeah, I really focused on catching spots just because you could catch so many at the time, and the largemouth were really scattered. You just didn't know when you were going to catch one. They were just hard to target at that point. At the beginning of that tournament, they were actually spawning. There was quite a few fish on the bed, but as the tournament progressed, there got to be less and less, and I was just fishing for spots exclusively then.
And do the spots in Smith act a lot like the spots we see in the western part of the United States, or do they act a little different?
Well, I guess they act, yeah, similar to the West, similar to any lake you find spots in, that they just tend to roam so much. With spots, there's nothing to hold a fish down. They want to cruise more like a striper does. So they tend to move a lot, but they also sit on vantage points that have a lot of bait flowing, a lot of movement. A lot of times, the reason the bait's there, whether it's stripers pushing them over or just a migration of bait. And we see that really in all lakes, not only Oroville or Shasta, but in Lanier or Hartwell. And the bluebacks are going to make that even more prevalent, I think, as they progress in a lake like this.
All right, excellent. Hey, I think that's a pretty good preview. We'll wait till next week to see what you can produce out there. But I got a whole stack of questions here
Okay.
from our viewers, so we'll just kind of get right into it. If you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
All right, the first question I got is from Mark Bramblett. He says, since we're coming off of Okeechobee, he says, when fishing a lake such as Okeechobee, is there something you look for to separate one fishing area from another? He says the grassy areas all look like they hold a lot of bass. So is there something you kind of try to key in on and pick apart in those miles and miles of grass?
Yeah, not only at Okeechobee, but any lake that has a lot of similar cover, you got to find something different there. Just to go fish it indiscriminately, you waste so much time. And the couple big things I look for at Okeechobee are overhead cover, which being mats and any thick vegetation mixed in those big fields of grass and areas that have more of those, but also hard bottom being close. So many of the fish at Okeechobee, And I find that a lot of times they end up just driving along, looking over the side of the boat, looking for shells and places where the bottom is harder and cleaner than in a lot of those areas that are really silted in.
All right. Our next question comes from Gabe Tucker. He asks, at what water temp would you start fishing the pre-spawn?
Yeah, hey Dave. It depends on the part of the country, but anytime you get water up in 45-degree range, you can catch some fish. That's kind of the marginal level. Some lakes, inherently, they bite at colder temperatures. You get to the Ozark lakes, you can catch them in low 40s, even high 30s in some of those. But generally, 45 is kind of the beginning of where you can start to catch them. And the clearer the water, generally colder you can catch them. If it's muddy in 45, it can be really difficult. Really clear water in 45, it gets a little bit easier, a lot more likely to catch fish. And really, once you get above 50, that's kind of when you're home free and the opportunity to have really good days out there.
And I'll kind of throw a little follow-up onto that. With the same mindset of pre-spawn bass, what are some of your favorite baits to use when you're trying to target pre-spawn fish?
The number one bait, in my opinion, for fish is just 110 or the 110 plus one are probably my favorite. But really, when the water's that cold, there's so many shad dying. Fish are pretty much exclusively feeding on bait fish at that point. Most of the crawfish are still in the mud. They're not out moving around much. So most of their diet consists of bait fish. And a lot of those shad don't do well in that cold of temperatures. So they're kind of sick floating around. It just makes the jerk bait hard choice to beat there. And secondly, would have to be a jig on top of that.
All right. Let's see. Next question. This one comes from Robert. He says, when the bite's tough and you can't work out a definitive pattern, other than fishing slow with light line and finesse presentations, what keeps you on track and motivated in those tough times?
Hey, Robert, sometimes I wish I knew the answers to that. It seems like having a lot of rods on the deck is usually played well for me when things are tough. And you're trying to figure out what's going on for that hour or that area. And usually that's 15 or 20 rods on my deck, using a lot of different presentations, just trying to make the right decisions as you go. And usually when it gets extremely tough, you end up at the end of the day looking back and going, wow, how did I catch 5 today? And a lot of times those came on 5 different baits. So I think experimentation is the biggest thing in an open mind. It's a lot harder to catch them if you have a closed mind and thinking what you should be doing is what you know. If you go out there and just keep trying to figure it out, a lot of times it just comes in. For me, fishing is always a problem-solving issue. And you just keep going through more baits, more presentations, different areas, and that kind of keeps you motivated, trying to find the next thing all the time. And like I said, a lot of times when it's really that tough, you look back and you go, wow, how did I end up catching that many fish throughout the day? And you really never figured anything out.
All right, let's see. Lost my spot on my questions here. Oh, our next one comes from Mark Hogue. He says, how long do you stay in an area during practice if you have fish before you try a different area or a different technique?
Well, practice is different in a lot of lakes. In some places and times of year, you're going to find groups of fish, and sometimes you're going to catch more singles. But if I get in an area and start getting a fair number of bites, a lot of times I intentionally leave instead of trying to explore the area more fully, and rather go back in the tournament and try to figure it out then. So again, you do have a little bit more of an open mind and figure out what things have changed or have not changed. And sometimes those areas are better than you think. Sometimes they're worse. But I'd rather figure it out in a tournament than go on hooking fish and getting preconceived notions about where I think fish should be or what they should be doing in practice. I'd rather figure that out in the tournament and hopefully take more to the scale.
Right on. And I guess this, our next question is, I guess, a slight follow-up to that. It comes from Stephen Filter. He says, how long and how much ground do you cover with a specific pattern, lure, or presentation before you switch it up?
Yeah, a lot of that depends on how confident you are in that presentation and how tough the bite will be. Like this time of year, I may spend all day throwing a Vision 110 jerkbait, but yeah, I'm trying different cadences, trying different types of banks, trying to figure it out. But my confidence in that bait is really, it's really there, and I know that some way, somehow, I'll be able to catch them on it. As it gets later in the year, usually you end up with more baits on the deck. There's more options of baits to throw. But it just depends on how confident you are that bait's going to work. And I never do the same thing very long with any particular bait or pattern, because you're constantly trying to figure out something better. Even if you're getting a few bites, I keep doing things different to try to get more. So, just I guess to answer the question, not very much ground or not very long doing the same thing, even though it may be with the same bait.
And I guess we'll kind of stick on that, the whole pre-fishing sort of questions. Our next one's from Andrew Finkel. He says, "How do you break down a lake? How do you break down a lake so fast and assure you're not fishing too fast to pass up winning fish?"
Andrew, I think all of us have fished over winning fish one time or another. There's all too many tournaments. You go through an area, somebody wins the event out of there. It happens quite a bit. But to break down a lake, usually I want to cover a lot of miles of water. We go to pretty big reservoirs with as big of an event as we have with that many boats. We have to be on a fairly decent sized body of water. And most generally, there's always one section of the lake that's better than the others. You'll see 6 or 8 or all 10, the top 10 in one section of the lake. So a lot of times, if I'm fishing pockets, say, I may run 3 or 4 miles in between pockets trying to find those sections of the lake that are more active. And yeah, you can miss them, but you just need to cover so much water to find those really active areas of the lake. It's really something that's so prevalent in so many tournaments. There's always one section. So it's really about covering water and not only trying different baits, but a lot of times you'll just get in an area of the lake that's either up a river or down by the dam that you'll see a lot more life there, a lot more bait on your graph up. You'll see birds diving. You might see a bunch of loons there. Whatever it is, you can just tell those areas have a lot more life. And you tend to slow down a little bit more in those areas. And, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't, you got to keep moving on, just covering tremendous amounts of water. And a little bit of research goes a long way, too. A lot of times you can just go on the internet and research a lake, and they may say if it's a table rock that, the James River Arm's been really good lately, or the White River Arm. And that's kind of a starting point. And it doesn't always prevail because a lot of times you're looking at information that was good and something else may be developing, but it was at least the starting point.
And along with that, are there times when you're pre-fishing that you will go and not really even make a cast? You'll just either use your electronics or use your eyes to try to find stuff without physically trying to catch a bass?
Yeah, there's definitely times, especially early like this, you can really ride around in your boat and a lot of times just look for life, whether it's birds or bait fish dipping the surface or just grappling around looking for bait in areas. A lot of times there'll be more bait pushed into certain areas, and generally where that bait's up shallower and packed in towards the bank or in a pocket or up on a point, generally there's a reason that's there, and there's usually bass somewhere around. So when it's early like this, a lot of times you can just get away with doing that. As it gets later, there's a lot of other factors where you're looking at water temperature, water color. Obviously, spawning areas as fish pull out, you want to be in the front of those. But again, everything happens at a different time, and there's so generally one part of the lake that's so much better, and you just got to fish a lot of it, but you got to cover a lot of water.
Excellent. All right. Let's see. Our next question is from Dick Lloyd. He says, "What do you feel is the best way to deal with muddy, cold water at a reservoir such as Santee Cooper in South Carolina?"
Muddy, cold water is probably the most difficult thing to catch fish in, especially in that mid-40s range. It's very difficult to catch fish in. And there's a couple of things you can do, and that's either fish targets that are covered that you can really fish slow and thorough on, or else throw reaction baits and cover a lot of water. But generally, in the afternoon, it's always getting up there as shallow as you can in that dirty water and find water that's a degree or two warmer, up in that super shallow water. Vibration bait is always a good bait there when it's really shallow like that. Anytime you're out fishing cover like the cypress trees there, I've fished there a few times when it's really cold and catch them on a tube or a jig, but it's really slow fishing over every knee of every tree, and you're getting not a lot of bites throughout the day, and you just got to know that coming in, but you can't fish slow when there's not something to fish around. So really got to stick around that cover to fish slow, and then especially in the afternoons, get up there and throw some type of vibration bait up shallow. As the water gets above 50, a spinner bait definitely comes into play also.
All right, Dick, hope that helps you out. Our next question is actually, it's a pretty good question for people that don't, fish a lot of tournaments and have, access to those big lakes. It comes from Ronnie Griffin, and he asks, how'd you fish a 2-acre farm pond? It says it has some wood, grass, and pads in it, and the deepest part is 8 feet.
It sounds like fun fishing a 2-acre farm pond. They can't get it. Figure out again, it's just a smaller version of pre-fishing a bigger lake, but you obviously don't cover as much water. But you're trying to get those first bites to figure out if those fish are right below your feet if you're standing on the bank, or if they're out deep in the middle. A lot of times in ponds, fish tend to spread out more, or we'll see them from the middle to the bank just because they're so populated. The water in those ponds is usually a lot more fertile than a big lake, and there's just a lot more fish in them. So you can catch them doing a lot of different things. But anytime you get to a pond, a spinner bait and some type of worm are really hard to beat. And, you just need to cast out deeper some and fish shallow around the bank some and figure out where you're getting those bigger bites at.
Good deal. All right, Ron Henry provides our next question. Says, do you ever remove the skirt on a Z-Man chatterbait and replace it with a swim bait? If so, explain. Living on Lake Fork, I've found this method to be productive lately.
Yeah, I actually do that, especially when you want a real slender profile. I like it around a shad spot or really clear water. Z-Man makes a swim bait called a Paddlers I really like on the back of there. If you want a really big profile, they make a grass kickers that also works good on there. But yeah, anytime you get in that clear water, I want a more natural slender profile. For some reason, they're in the shad spot. It seems to work pretty good in clear water too. One pretty neat thing I've been doing lately is taking the mini putting little streaks on there, which is a 3.5-inch little minnow bait. And you make it a real small profile bait when the minnows are fairly small and they're chasing small bait around.
All right, we're gonna stick on the Z-Man topic here, I guess, for a second.
Okay.
Greg Hopper asks, what's your favorite Z-Man bait and color?
Oh, I would have to say it's the fatties and green pumpkin. That's a worm I developed for him, I guess, a year and a half ago or so, and it's made me a lot of money over the last season, and anticipated doing the same this season. I have a little bit of a personal attraction to it, that it was kind of my idea, and it's been really successful for me. In that worm and green pumpkin, and just anywhere in the country, you get a lot of bites on it. I've caught some 5 and 6 and 7 pound fish on it, but for a money-making bait, it catches so many 2 to 4 pound fish. And I throw it on a shaky head on like 12-pound gamma, pitching it around a lot of heavy cover a lot of times, or even a Texas rig, and kind of call it more power finesse. I don't throw it on a shaky head on a spinning rod like you would a little worm, but rather you can use heavier line. I'll use a 3/16 head a lot of times, and or the same in a bullet weight, and just pitch it around that heavier cover, the same places a lot of people are pitching a jig or a tube or a beaver or whatever it is, something that's a little bit more bulky, and that worm seems to get a lot of bites. And I've even caught them with it on a football head, on a Carolina rig. It's just been it's been really productive for me.
And another Z-Man bait, the Hula sticks. What's probably the best way you can rig one of those?
That's really probably a better, like a light finesse type shaky head bait, or else on a drop shot are the two best ways to throw that bait. It's actually a really big bait in the Midwest. I'll throw it on a mushroom head with an exposed hook quite a bit. I personally don't fish like that. They catch a lot of numbers of fish on it like that, though, just with a jig head, a rigged expose on it. Myself, I fish probably a little faster than that. Would be more likely to throw it on a shaky head or else on a drop shot. It's good also.
All right. I guess this is still kind of another one bait kind of question. It's from Chase Erie. He says, if you could only fish one lure for the rest of your life, what would it be?
One lure for the rest of my life. Well, that's a tough one. Think about all the tackle I have. If I had to just pick one bait, that would be pretty challenging. I don't know. I would say day in and day out, it would probably be that fatties again. That's such a, just such of a universal bait. Boy, it'd be hard to beat that for year-round fishing. But also even that megabass jerkbait I talked about earlier, that's a bait that doesn't get a lot of attention. Bait that the same Vision 110 and even the silent riser when you want to work it faster. Some people kind of give up on it. There's so many places you can go behind people and throw a jerkbait when the water's warm and everybody thinks it's not a jerkbait time of year, but you're still catching a lot of fish, just working it a lot differently, working a lot faster than you would in the spring.
All right. Zach Cox brings us our next question. He says, was this the best career you've ever had, and will you ever think about changing careers?
I actually get asked what I'd do if I wasn't fished quite often, and I always say I don't know, I may be homeless. This is about the only thing I've ever done. I'm pretty fortunate that the last job I had, I was, I think, a sophomore in college. I worked part-time in a tackle store, and I've always been able to fish and make a living, so I've been pretty lucky, and I hope that moment never comes, and I surely don't know what I'd do if I had to find a job.
Let's see. Nicholas Speck brings us our next question. Says, how did you get where you are today with all your sponsors you have now and all that skill you've acquired? How'd you kind of get up to the point you're at right now, Luke?
Yeah, Nicholas, it's been a lot of hard work and dedication. I missed out on a lot in high school and college. I traveled around, and I moved to California, lived down there after college for a while, just trying to make it, living on a dime, living on my winnings, and it kind of has escalated from there. To get the skill level I have right now, it's helped a lot to go to so many different lakes, see so many different fisheries. You learn so much every place you go to. Every place is different. You just figure out a little something new, and you become better and figuring them out. And as far as the sponsors go, sponsors are kind of a double-edged sword that a lot of people don't understand. I think that sponsors too, after you have a fair amount of success for the most part, that are really of a large financial contribution. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You already had that success and don't need sponsors is bad, but you don't get them until you've had that. They obviously want to sponsor people that are proven performers. So that's something that the sponsors just kind of come with the more skill you have, and the skill comes with the more time you spend on the water and the harder you work.
All right, I think this next question's a really great question, especially for probably a lot of the people viewing this. It comes from Alex Kaminsky. Said, what's your number one tip you would give someone who wants to become a pro angler but doesn't know where to start? Lots of people want to become pro, but few actually do. So what sets apart pro anglers from an average tournament angler?
Yeah, Alan, that's probably the best way to start is getting some type of competition, whether it's a club level, a BFL, EverStart. You're never going to get better unless you realize how good you are, and that's the only way to do that is by fishing against people. Everybody can be the greatest on their lake if they don't know how everyone else did, and you really need to get in some type of competition. If you're not fishing any events now, I'd recommend starting at the BFLs and work your way to the EverStarts and keep working your way up only after you've had that success. And really, that's the best way to, get to the pro level. It seems like we see people that try to jump too far ahead, and a lot of times they have failures and fall back and never really make it. The people that are really the best fishermen that I know of anyway always seem to have worked their way up and they don't move up to the next level until they have those successes. And you got to be good at that lower level before you're going to compete at the next one. And you just gotta get in those tournaments and start with it and start working hard and beat all those guys in your club or in the BFLs. And when you do that, jump to the next one.
And people shouldn't be afraid to jump into, say, EverStart level tournaments or even like tour level tournaments as a co-angler, right?
Right. That's a great way to learn. Those co-angler events, we've seen some great fishermen. Brian Thrift started as a co-angler. There've been quite a few of them that have really great anglers that have learned a lot as a co-angler. But those people that fish as a co-angler, it's a learning experience. I think along with that, it would be a good combination if you fish, say, never start at BFL level and also a co-angler on the FLW Tour and try to take those things back. And you got to be able to catch those fish out of the front of the boat still. So I think both things are, good aspects of the learning curve there. You can learn a lot from a co-angler, but you still need to learn how to find those fish on your own and fish those events where you're running the boat.
And Alex has actually a follow-up question to that, or to his first question, and he asks, what's more important to a company who sponsors anglers? How well they fish and place in a tournament, or how well they conduct themselves off the water?
Alex, I don't think there's really a substitute for either. I think you need to have both of those. You need to be able to have the skill level, but also have that professionalism. And without the skill level, you don't get a lot of attention, notoriety, where you're going to be able to offer a tremendous amount for a sponsor. But you also need to have that professionalism too, and do a good job promoting their product and promoting yourself.
Absolutely. All right, we're moving along here. We're getting, let's see, we got Randall Smith asking a question. And Randall says, I was watching a fishing show, and they took the treble hooks off a crankbait and put a single trailer hook on for weed control. Is this the way to go?
In my opinion, no. We catch so many fish that are hooked with one hook. They're hooked outside the mouth, especially around a lot of vegetation. The fish is a lot more likely to miss it. Now, if you're out fun fishing, not worried about losing or missing a few fish, it's definitely not a bad idea to try. I can't say personally I've done it, so I wouldn't give you a 100% honest answer to say it's not true, but I know for me, my experience has been treble hooks are the way to go, and the way to get the weed control down is usually to use a stiffer rod or heavier line, whether it's like a tough line, braided line, something like that, to actually rip the bait out of the grass rather than worry about the grass getting on the hooks.
Great point. See, next question comes from John T. He says, when entering the water for the first time, what is going through your mind as far as finding key locations for the big bite, what are key locations for the big bite, even if you have been to the lake before?
Yeah, but really, it's just so much about practice and making those decisions as you get into the event, even where you've gotten some bigger bites in the past. Some baits that traditionally catch bigger bites. I always have a tremendous amount of ideas. Right now, I'm thinking about Smith Lake. Throughout the day, I come up with all kinds of ideas. I'll have all sorts of crazy baits in my boat, thinking, wow, this may work and catch some really big fish. And 95% of my ideas will be wrong when we go there. So a lot of it's just trying to figure it out as you go. And those big bites can come on so many different things. I've caught a lot of 5 to 7 pounders throwing a shaky head trying to catch a limit real quick. And you think, wow, I never expected that to happen. You may go out and throw a big jig, think you're going to catch a big fish doing this or that, and you catch a little one. It's really easy to be wrong. So it's just really coming up with a lot of ideas and trying a lot of different stuff. And there's no shortage of ideas for me. And I guess I'm not afraid to be wrong. As many tournaments as I've fished now, you get used to being wrong quite often. So it's just a trial and error process.
And we'll keep going back. Another pre-spawn kind of question for you here. This one comes from Andy Wessinger. And he says, what's the best way to find larger fish for a pre-spawn pattern on a clear herring lake like Murray?
Yeah, like Murray, those pre-spawn fish, you're going to either catch them out deep, especially on a herring lake. It seems like you'll either catch them out deep until that water gets up in around the 50s, and they'll start getting up on those points. And those herring lakes, the drains are always really good. And when I say the drains, the middle of a pocket, and you might have to idle 30 or 40 of them before you find one with a bunch of bait and fish in it. And a lot of times when you find those, you can go back to them. Generally, first thing in the morning, those fish bite a lot better. So you can go back there first thing in the morning and catch those fish pretty good, actually. It's just a lot of time in the motor for me in those herring lakes. And as you get up in the day, I'll move to fishing more docks and laydowns, covers, stuff like that, where those fish will actually hit on that. And the first area is all about the bait in those herring lakes, and you're going to catch most of the fish early in the lake, and that's typical of a lot of pre-spawn fishers, not only herring lakes, but it's definitely more specific to those that they bite really good in the morning, and from 2:30 on they start to bite again, and most generally then they're getting around cover a little bit more areas that are warming, and you're getting more brim moving up, and they're starting to leave the herring a little bit.
And another part two, I guess, to Andy's question is, how do you catch those suspended fish? What's your favorite bait for doing that?
I like a fish head stem with that streaks on there, the little 3.75 inch streaks Zman makes. That's really hard to beat in the morning in those drains. Just cast up to the middle, and you want to pinch a little bit back to the boat through that bait. That's really good in the morning. As the sun gets up, the docks are really good with the jerk bait. I really like the Vision 110 for that, but they also have an FX 110 now that the bill moves on, and it casts even more accurately than that does, and you can really throw it down the side of those docks. And you get a lot of fish that will suspend in those same drains on the docks on the side of it as the day moves on, the sun progresses, those docks start to warm, and the sunlight penetrates a little further. They'll actually get up on those docks, and you can catch them on that jerkbait pretty good late.
All right. Jeremiah Davis says he spoke with you in Mobile, Alabama at Chevy Pro Night during the EverStart Championship about 3 or 4 years ago. It said you showed him a way to rig up a shaky head. Do you have any more advanced ways of rigging a shaky head? He said it's been producing good numbers of fish for him.
Oh, the shaky head's a pretty simple bait, I guess, and it's kind of hard to come up with a lot of different things with it. I don't know of a lot of different rigging ideas. The shaky head I do use is a shaky head with the lead on the shank, where you slide the top of your worm up on the shank and rig it Texas rigged like that. I don't particularly like the heads with the screw on them. I just don't think you get the same fall. It doesn't spiral down as much. So for anybody else watching, that's the one I like to use. And there's really not a lot to do with it. One little trick, if you are catching spotted bass, is to actually take the head and bend the whole shank of the hook down right where it meets the lead. So your hook point is essentially like this to the eye, and you'll catch a lot of fish that are short biting your worm, especially with spotted bass. If they're ever biting the tail of your worm off, if you bend your point angle up that much steeple, you'll catch a lot of those fish.
Hey, I think that's some great advice. Do you have, just in terms of rigging stuff in general, are there any other kind of oddball ways you rig a bait?
Boy, ask me a question like that, I try to think about what I do. To me, it doesn't seem as odd as it does to some other people. Yeah. I'm trying to think of anything else. There are a lot of stuff we do. It seems so normal. I've done it for years, like throwing a wacky worm. I'll use a lead wire from fly tires and wrap it around the shank of the hook for a little bit of extra weight. Just so many little things like that don't come to mind, I guess, off the top of my head.
All right. We'll go on. Got another question here. This one's from Andrew Mudge. He says, did you start fishing tournaments at a young age? My son is 8 and is wanting to be a pro. We were just starting him on fishing in the youth here locally in Texas. What advice would you give a child when fishing a tournament, and what advice would you give the dad to make sure he can help him in a successful career?
Yeah, I started fishing tournaments really young. I guess I was maybe not 8. I was probably 10 when I first started fishing tournaments at a club level. I started fishing against kids, and by the time I was 13 or 14, I moved to the adult side fishing against them. I was still fishing out of my dad's boat, out of the back of his boat. It's not like I was running the boat and finding the fish on my own by any means. But just to get him involved in it and take him fishing as much as you can would be a huge advantage. Get him out there to as many different lakes as you can, and using a bunch of different rods, but make sure it's fun for him. I know for me, once I got involved, I was so consumed with it. It was hard to keep me off the water. So as long as he's that young, I definitely make sure to keep it fun for him. But try to keep him fishing as many days as he wants to go on the water, and give him every opportunity he can to get out there. I know a big thing for me is my parents worked when I was younger, and they'd always take and drop me off on the way to the lake in a 12-foot aluminum boat, and I'd fish all day in the summers. And I learned a lot, and probably not a lot I use today. Maybe there's some of it, I don't know, but it definitely kept that passion and drive up for me. So just keep him fishing.
All right, that's actually we're getting kind of close to the end of our time here, Luke. That's it for questions. But I do got another thing. Is there any tournament if you count Smith, going through the rest of the tour season? Which stop are you looking forward to the most, and why?
Oh, it would definitely have to be Grand Lake. That's a lake I've never fished before. Heard so many good things about the fishing there. It's always fun to go to new places, kind of just like exploring. Going to something like that you don't know anything about is always exciting and new, and it's just kind of different. And the fishing's supposed to be really good there. I think that's probably going to be one of, if not the best tournaments we've had we'll have this whole year. Between that and Chickamauga, I think the weights are going to be phenomenal. And so definitely excited about going there just mostly because it's new.
And real quick, is there a lake you're not looking forward to going out of the rest of the schedule here?
Oh, I think we just left Chevy for me. Even though as great a fishing as it is, I have really struggled there the last few years. I used to like going to Florida, but I've really been struggling there. And yeah, I guess that was probably my most dreaded tournament because my history there the last couple of years, and I didn't do a whole lot better. So hopefully I'm on the home stretch, and that was my worst event of the year at this point.
And we actually got one more question here.
Okay.
Since you became a pro, if you look back from kind of when you got your start in tournament fishing, have you noticed it takes you not as long to find a pattern and find fish, or do you still go those long days and not quite be able to put anything together?
On average, I would say it does not take me as long to find fish and find a pattern, but there's definitely days out there you just can't really get anything going, can't get it together. It's frustrating, but you're going to have those. Regardless who you are, you're going to have those days. I remember my first couple of years fishing back on this side of the country, coming from Washington. I had one of those days, and I do it now, just because I've learned so much about these fisheries, and I've also how to find fish quicker. So, yeah, I definitely have those days, but there's not as many of them as there used to be, and hopefully it gets to be less and less. Hopefully I continue to learn more.
All right, I think that's it we got for questions, Luke. Real quick, we were just wondering, is Andy sitting anywhere near you? Does he want to stop in and say hey?
Yeah, just a second.
We got Luke's actually sitting he's at Andy Morgan's house right now. Because Clausen, there he is right there. How you doing, Andy?
I'm good. How are y'all?
You been enjoying the chat?
Do what, buddy?
You been enjoying the chat so far?
I'm hearing bits and pieces here.
Yeah, our connection's starting to kind of break up a little bit. Can you hear me all right now?
Yeah, I got you now.
I guess real quick, I want to ask you, you're probably not looking forward to the Chickamauga tournament, are you?
I don't know. That's a lot of pressure. It's kind of right here in the back door, but yeah, I believe it'll be okay.
Well, it's good to see you. We figured we had to get you in here if you know, Luke was hogging up your room there and trying to act like he shot that deer.
Yeah, he'll do that. He'll take credit for that if you let him. You let him get away with it.
Well, it was our connection's kind of starting to get a little bad here, and we're running short on time, so we just thought we'd say hey to you, and want to thank Luke, wherever Luke's at right now.
Yeah, he's listening.
Hey, we thank you guys, and we'll catch you guys at Smith.
You got it, man. Good talking to you.